Millionaire cries for not having kids, until starving twins knock and look exactly like him. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The streets of Westbridge welcomed winter's afternoon with gusts that howled between bare branches, swirling faded petals into lazy spirals. On wide, clean roads where luxury cars usually passed without pause, no one could have predicted that this cold crimson dusk would mark a turning point behind the long, quiet doors of a certain mansion. Jonathan Reed, 42, was a man whose name everyone in the city knew. A distant real estate magnate, a symbol of success, solitary power, and silent grief. Since Claire, his wife, had passed away following a failed pregnancy, Jonathan had retreated behind the towering granite-colored windows of his estate. His life was measured in board meetings, contracts, and carefully worded legal responses. Love, the hope for children, and mornings filled with laughter had become memories. That afternoon, Jonathan sat before a dying fire in the living room, pouring himself his usual glass of whiskey and preparing to return to a new set of PowerPoint slides, until the doorbell rang. Unexpected. For 2 years, that door had only opened for Richards, his loyal butler, or scheduled business partners. The bell ringing out suddenly like that? Nearly unthinkable. Jonathan stepped onto the entry landing. To his surprise, Richards was approaching, visibly unsettled. "Sir, there are 2 children at the door. They look quite unusual." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "Unusual?" Richards gestured outside. Jonathan opened the door, and in that instant his world stopped. 2 twin boys stood there in worn sweaters and faded jeans, cheeks flushed red from the wind. But what froze Jonathan wasn't their clothes. It was their eyes. Blue. The same familiar Colorado sky blue. Exactly like his own when he was their age. Both of them. "Excuse me, sir," said the older boy, his voice shaking slightly but steady. "We're hungry. Our mom's very sick and hasn't eaten today. We're not asking for money, just a bit of food to bring home to her." Jonathan didn't respond. He just stared. Their small faces were tense, hardened by something beyond their years. The way the older boy stood in front, shielding his younger brother, every part of it struck something deep inside him. "Come in," Jonathan said. His voice echoed softly, as if it didn't belong to him. And just like that, the first door in his life opened, after years of staying shut. A broken door, maybe, but one that carried the roots of change. Inside the mansion Jonathan Reed had long treated as nothing more than a place to look out from, the 2 boys, Liam and Lucas Carter, sat quietly on a deep blue velvet sofa, their small hands clasped together. The golden glow of the lights did little to chase away the cold emptiness seeping through the walls of the house. Jonathan sat across from them, doing his best not to show how shaken he was. As he slowly pieced together their story, an unexpected question from Liam struck him like a blow to the chest. "Are you mourning your wife?" Jonathan faltered. In that moment, he saw something strange in the boy's eyes, an uncanny sense of empathy. What had brought these children to his door on such a freezing afternoon, so far from the life he'd carefully planned and constructed? While he was still lost in thought, Mrs. Mabel, the housekeeper who had served the Reeds for over 20 years, entered the room carrying a tray. Her eyes, steady and warm in her early 60s, held a quiet understanding for her employer. She gently announced, "Homemade roasted chicken and squash. I hope you boys enjoy." The boys exchanged a glance, then bowed their heads slightly. "Thank you, ma'am." Mabel turned to look at Jonathan, her gaze a soft reminder. He nodded faintly, then sat down, though his mind buzzed with unspoken questions. "Have you eaten anything today?" Jonathan asked, though the answer was already clear. Lucas gave a tiny nod. "The neighbor gave us 2 slices of bread the day before yesterday. Mama didn't eat. She pretended she wasn't hungry." The quiet words hit like a thunderclap. Jonathan said nothing. He simply sat in silence as thoughts rippled through his mind, questions with no answers yet. When Liam mentioned that their mother's name was Emily Parker, Jonathan thought he must have misheard. Emily Parker. The name slid through him like a knife, peeling away the armor he'd long worn to forget the past. Emily, the bright administrative assistant with a smile that always left him flustered, the woman for whom he once skipped meetings just to drive her home, the woman he had let go in the most painful moment of her life, in pursuit of ambitions he thought mattered more. She used to work in an office, Liam continued, voice barely louder than a breath. Now she's always tired. She went to college too, but people don't like to hire someone sick or late. Each word, delivered so gently, pierced like needles. Jonathan led the boys to the dining room. Mabel had already set the table with 3 chairs placed close together to avoid any feeling of distance. The boys ate slowly, politely, with the restrained manners of children used to hiding hunger. Jonathan watched them, his mind racing through 100 silent possibilities. Could it be? Could these boys actually be? Suddenly, he stiffened. He remembered. In the storage cabinet where he kept old employee files, the name Emily Parker still existed. There was one thing he'd never truly examined. A letter from her, lost among the papers Victor, his former assistant, had once managed. Jonathan glanced at the boys again. Liam helping Lucas ladle more sauce onto his plate with care far beyond their years. There was something both heartbreaking and beautiful in the way they carried themselves. Then, from somewhere deep inside the hollow spaces of his heart, Jonathan heard himself say, "Tonight, if you'd like, I'll have Mrs. Mabel prepare the guest room upstairs for you. It's getting too cold to be out in weather like this." 2 wide eyes turned toward him. Lucas looked at Liam, who gave a small nod before offering a shy smile. "Thank you, sir. Mama will be happy knowing we were treated kindly." Jonathan didn't say another word. He simply nodded slowly, as if trying to capture and hold on to this moment forever. And in the quiet chill of a mansion long stripped of warmth, a dinner, simple and silent, began to thaw something frozen. The letter never delivered. Outside the mansion, the fireplace flickered with quiet warmth while snow fell thick outside the window, like memories from a time long lost. In the private library behind the main living room, Jonathan Reed sat alone, his fingers tracing the spine of an old leather-bound book he couldn't bring himself to read. Since the sudden arrival of the twin boys, Liam and Lucas, his mind had been clouded with silent questions. Why did they look so much like him? Why did their mother's name have to be Emily? Emily Parker, a name he had buried for the past 7 years, ever since their brief relationship ended at the company. Back then, Emily had been a trusted and discreet administrative assistant. They'd shared quiet lunches, knowing glances, and a soft intimacy that never fully needed words. Then one day, he was introduced to Vivian, his future wife. The relationship with Emily ended with an apology and a promise. "I'll never forget what we shared." But he had forgotten, until he saw Liam and Lucas. What began as suspicion had become an obsession. That night, Jonathan descended into the basement archive to dig through the old employee records. The underground library preserved documents from years past, all carefully stored in boxes marked by department. "Emily Parker," he murmured, slowly scanning for her name. A light blue personnel file caught his attention. Inside were standard HR forms, some appointment records, but what shattered him was a golden envelope with handwritten words. To Jonathan, "I'm sorry." The letter was faded, but still carried the scent of old paper and forgotten time. "Jonathan, by the time you read this, I will have left the company and, as quietly as I can, left your life. I had hoped to tell you in person, but something always got in the way. Yesterday, I went to the doctor. I found out I'm pregnant. I'm not asking for anything. No anger, no demands. I just believe you deserve to know that somewhere in this world, there will be a child who carries your blood. I will leave Blackwood Industries and start a new life. Don't look for me. But if one day you wish to know about the child, that window will always be open. Emily." Jonathan sank to the cold floor. His chest tightened as though an invisible wire had wrapped around his heart. The letter had been withheld for 7 years. Who had kept it from him? Who had made that choice on his behalf? One name rose in his mind: Carl Winston. Carl, his friend, lawyer, and trusted strategist since the early days of his company. Carl had been in charge of managing all sensitive correspondence, supposedly to protect the brand. Jonathan remembered their old habit, backing up sensitive emails and compiling monthly privacy reports. He opened his laptop and logged into the old system. In an encrypted folder labeled Urgency Level 2, Blocked Emails, he found it. From Emily Parker. Subject: Jonathan, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. Just beneath that, an internal memo. Email handled by Carl Winston. Not forwarded. Reason: to protect image during upcoming engagement with Vivian Gray. Jonathan slammed the laptop shut. His entire body felt frozen. Emily's final words echoed in his mind. If one day you wish to know about the child, that window will always be open. Liam and Lucas, the boys he had only just begun calling by name, were his biological sons, and he had never known. In this story, no one had lost more than the children. Jonathan stood. For the first time in years, a fierce, unfamiliar yearning stirred in his heart. The desire to be a father, and to fight for what he had unknowingly left behind. At one point in his life, Jonathan Reed believed that things like love, family, or children were just abstract ideas, secondary to a successful career. He had chosen ambition, and in return, received long days of solitude and silent nights spent staring at lifeless paintings hanging on the walls of his grand estate. But in just a few short days, two twin boys, Liam and Lucas, had cracked that heavy armor of his, opening a path toward redemption and quiet transformation. Every morning, after seeing the two boys still fast asleep in the guest room bed, Jonathan felt something in his heart begin to shift. Lucas often murmured in his sleep, nervously rubbing his fingernails when he dreamed of his mother. Liam always looked around protectively before gently guiding his brother to brush their teeth. These little gestures reminded Jonathan of his own childhood, how he once worried over his younger brother in a poor and crowded home. For the first time in years, Jonathan began staying home more often, setting aside the demands of his business. At first, he simply sat nearby while the boys watched cartoons. But before long, he was joining them in puzzle games, chess matches, and reading bedtime stories to Lucas. One evening, Jonathan carefully placed a makeshift astronaut helmet, clumsily crafted from cardboard, on Liam's head. "Captain Liam, prepare for liftoff," he announced, trying not to laugh as Lucas solemnly switched on a flashlight to simulate laser beams. Laughter echoed through the living room, real, full-bodied laughter. And for the first time in years, Jonathan realized the house was alive again. Meanwhile, Emily Parker lay pale and exhausted in bed, her breathing ragged from severe pneumonia. Jonathan had personally called Dr. Ashton, the same doctor who had once cared for his late wife Claire, to examine her. After the exam, Dr. Ashton pulled Jonathan aside in the hallway. "She has acute pneumonia. She needs to be hospitalized immediately. It's worse than I expected." Jonathan nodded without hesitation. "Do whatever needs to be done. Don't worry about the cost." From the moment Emily was admitted to the hospital, Jonathan stepped fully into the role of caregiver for the two boys. He prepared their favorite cereal for breakfast, drove them to school and soccer practice, and listened to their endless stories about new friends, favorite drawing classes, and dreams of becoming astronauts. In the home library, where once a cold gray wall had served as a productivity board, Jonathan placed the first family photo that included Liam and Lucas. It became a space where the boys stuck star-shaped stickers, drew rocket ships, and colored scenes of their future family every morning before school. One afternoon, after the boys had fallen asleep on the sofa following their favorite cartoon, Jonathan sat quietly in the dim room. His mind wandered to the past, the long meetings, the cold strategy retreats, and the hopeful vacations with Claire when the dream of a family still felt within reach. But Claire was gone. She had left behind a Jonathan who had grown hollow and guarded. Now before him were two sons who didn't ask for anything, just honest love and the warmth of what had once been missing. He began redrafting his daily schedule. Pickup times, playtime, hospital visits with Emily. Some nights, he didn't sleep, choosing instead to knit two scarves for the boys to wear in the early winter chill. For the first time in many years, he didn't try to be perfect. He was simply trying to be a father. Then, on a cold, rainy evening, as Jonathan tucked them in, Lucas suddenly asked, "Uncle Jonathan, why are you so nice to us?" The question caught Jonathan off guard. He sat beside them, the soft glow of the lamp falling over Lucas's sleepy face. And with a voice full of quiet emotion, he answered, "Because you deserve the very best. And because you knocked on the right door." Awakening and confrontation. On a freezing, wind-whipped morning, pale sunlight filtered through the window of a small hospital room, casting soft shadows across the weary face of Emily Parker. Her breaths were shallow, her hands trembled as they brushed against her eyes, her head throbbed, and her chest felt like it was being crushed under the weight of a stone. A soft scraping sound from a metal chair brought her back to reality. Nurse Olivia was adjusting the forebag, replacing the fluids. When she saw Emily blinking, Olivia offered a warm smile. "Good morning, Ms. Parker. You're finally awake." Emily coughed hoarsely and tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness hit her, and her frail body collapsed back onto the pillow. Olivia gently helped her settle. "It's okay. You're at Westbridge Hospital. Your son's brought you here. And the one who's been covering all the medical bills is Mr. Jonathan Reed." Emily froze. Her face shifted with shock. "Jonathan? Jonathan Reed is here? He's taking care of my boys." Olivia nodded. "Every single day. He visits you, then goes home to make their sandwiches, get their clothes and shoes ready for school. They adore him." Emily turned toward the wall, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. Her voice cracked. Does he know that Liam and Lucas are his children?" Nurse Olivia gently shook her head. "I'm not sure he does, but what I do know is that he cares for them deeply." When Olivia left the room, Emily reached for her old wallet on the nightstand. Inside it, worn and creased, was a check, one she had never cashed. The name signed at the bottom, Carl Winston. The amount, $250,000. The memo line read, "In exchange for silence and permanent departure from Jonathan's life." The memory came back like it was yesterday. 7 years ago, when she was still working as Jonathan's assistant at Reed Corporation, their love had been brief, but real. When she told Carl she was pregnant, he had arrived with the check and an ultimatum: leave, disappear, stay silent, or be accused of professional misconduct, publicly shamed, and ruin Jonathan's reputation. She had torn the check in half that day, in front of Carl. She chose to raise the children on her own, in hardship and obscurity, rather than sell her dignity for money. But she remained silent. She carried her babies away and rebuilt from nothing. That afternoon, Jonathan arrived at the hospital, carrying Lucas's favorite picture book and a small bouquet of red carnations for Emily. When he entered, Emily was sitting upright against the pillows, gazing out the window with tired, clouded eyes. "Hi, Emily," Jonathan said softly. "I owe you more than I can ever say." Emily turned to him. She looked thinner, fragile, but her eyes were clear and calm. "Why now, Jonathan? It's been 7 years. Did you ever once try to find me?" Jonathan hesitated. "I didn't know," he said, voice trembling. "Carl hid your letter from me. I found it last week. In it, you told me you were pregnant." Emily's eyes widened, her hands trembling. "You never knew I was carrying your children, Liam and Lucas." She stood, slowly, walked over, and placed the old check, signed by Carl, into Jonathan's hands. "Do you see this?" she said quietly. "This was what Carl brought me. I thought it came from you. I thought that's what I was worth to you." Jonathan stared at the paper, then clenched it tightly in his fist. "I'll deal with Carl personally. I promise you that. I've already lost 7 years, Emily. I'm not losing another day." Emily's voice broke. "I don't want money, Jonathan. I just want our boys to be safe and loved." Jonathan looked straight at her, his eyes full of conviction. "I want to be their father. Truly, if you'll let me." That night, Jonathan sat by the hospital window, watching over Liam and Lucas as they dozed off on the lounge chairs. For the first time in years, his heart felt full of something he'd long forgotten the name of: family. When love becomes a headline. Nearly 3 weeks after Emily was discharged from the hospital, Jonathan Reed's home was livelier than ever. Each morning began with the laughter of Liam and Lucas as they chased each other around the garden, while Emily, still not fully recovered, would rise early to brew tea in the kitchen with quiet resolve. Jonathan never doubted that these are the most meaningful days of his life, sharing warm breakfasts, reading books to the boys before bed, smiling softly at his desk while Lucas sang a silly poem about outer space. For the first time in years, his house, once cold and echoing, was blooming again with the warmth of family. Until the story hit the front page of the New York Herald. Jonathan Reed, global real estate tycoon, has secret children? The headline was paired with a candid photo taken from a distance. Jonathan holding Liam's hand at the park while Lucas followed closely behind. The caption blared, "Twins reunited with billionaire father." Within 24 hours, every phone line at Reed Holdings was ringing off the hook. Shareholders were panicked. The media flooded his inbox. Business partners demanded answers. Worse, a viral blog post fanned the flames. Emily Parker, the broke secretary who left her kids on a billionaire's doorstep and struck gold overnight. Emily was suddenly thrust back into the center of a media frenzy. Reporters camped outside the house. Neighbors whispered. Jonathan's phone buzzed with anonymous messages, some hostile. At school, Liam was asked, "Are you really his illegitimate kid?" Lucas was teased. "Your mom just wanted to be rich, right?" One afternoon, the boys came home with confused, hurt expressions. Emily caught it instantly. "What did someone say to you?" she asked gently. Liam looked at her and whispered, "They don't understand why we're being talked about like we did something wrong." That evening, at dinner, Emily turned to Jonathan, angry and overwhelmed. "You promised to keep this quiet." Jonathan silenced his phone, then scheduled an emergency meeting with his communications team. "We'll release a statement, one that protects the boys and Emily." Emily, voice trembling, said, "Maybe I should take the boys and go back to our old life. It was poor, but at least it was safe." Jonathan didn't hesitate. "I can't lose them again. I won't. I'll stand between them and everything else." He called in a crisis management expert, an old contact of his late wife's. In a sleek boardroom lit by warm yellow lamps, the calm, composed woman said, "We're not going to play by their rules. We'll tell a story about a father who wants to make things right, a mother who raised her children in silence, asking for nothing, and two bright little boys who just want to go to school without being judged." And so, the campaign began. A short video showed Liam and Lucas building robots out of cardboard fire extinguisher boxes. A photo caption read, "We just want mom to get better." Slowly, the online hate softened. One of Lucas's classmates wrote a letter of apology, explaining her younger brother had misunderstood rumors. Emily saw it all. She put her phone down, trembling. "I'm scared I can't protect them from the world." Jonathan took her hand. "We can't stop the world, but we can be their safe place." That night, Lucas asked in a whisper, "Mom, are you a bad person?" Emily knelt down, gently cupping his face. "No, sweetheart. I'm just a tired person who tried really, really hard." Jonathan stood quietly in the doorway, listening. What he hadn't expected was this. Family wasn't just cozy dinners and quiet mornings. It was also the courage to stand together when the world came crashing in. And deep in his heart, Jonathan knew life hadn't changed because of a scandal. It had changed because he had finally found what truly mattered. A family. Confrontation with a betrayed friend. The late afternoon sky darkened, as if foreshadowing a storm. Inside the familiar, heavy silence of Reed's private office, Jonathan stood by the tall window, his gaze distant. In his hand was a thin envelope bearing the name Carl Winston. The door clicked shut behind him. Carl entered, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit, his expression calm, unreadable. For over a decade, he had been the man Jonathan trusted without question, until the letter surfaced. "Do you remember this letter?" Jonathan asked coldly, placing the envelope on the desk and sliding it toward Carl. Carl glanced at it, then lifted his head. "Jonathan, I did what needed to be done. I protected you and the reputation of Reed Holdings." Jonathan's fist clenched. The air between them buzzed like a live wire. "Did you even read it?" "The letter Emily sent, telling me she was pregnant. She tried to reach me. And you, the man I trusted like family, what did you do with it? Carl took a long, deliberate breath. It was a difficult choice. That pregnancy would have ruined everything. Your name, your stock value, your future. At the time, Reed Holdings was in the middle of defense contracts, and Claire had just entered her life. Jonathan cut him off, voice hard. So you decided for me? You silenced a pregnant woman and erased her from my life. Unseen behind the slightly ajar door, Emily had heard every word. Her chest burned with emotions she thought had long been buried. The truth, what had torn her apart for 7 years, was nothing more than a business decision. A calculation. Carl stood, steadying himself. I sacrificed a lot to protect you, Jonathan. I devoted my entire career to building this empire with you. Jonathan's voice was quiet, but cut like glass. And in return, you robbed me of the chance to be a father. You took away a family. There was nothing more to say. Carl walked out, his hand trembling as he gripped the doorknob. Emily turned away, avoiding his eyes as he passed through the hallway. When the door finally shut behind him, she stepped quietly into the room. You really didn't know, she said, her voice soft, like an old memory finally finding its way out. Jonathan turned to her, his eyes filled with remorse. I swear, Emily, I never saw that letter. I'm so sorry. She looked at him, then out the same window she used to gaze through with hope. For 7 years, she had raised her children in silence, believing he had chosen wealth over love. She had been wrong. I used to doubt myself, she said. I wondered if I did the right thing by keeping the boys. But now, I know I did. I just didn't know the full truth. Jonathan extended his arms slightly. Emily nodded, not stepping into the embrace just yet, but in her eyes, the bitterness was gone. Only sorrow remained, and a quiet understanding. Let me think, she whispered, and let's find a way to begin again. Reed Manor had never been more alive. The antique paintings and lavish furniture remained, but the laughter of Liam and Lucas breathed new life into every brick, every rug. Jonathan Reed was no longer the lonely figure wandering his silent castle. He was beginning to feel love again through the simplest things. But just as the world seemed to be mending, a new crack appeared. News of Jonathan Reed's secret sons began circulating across tabloids and news sites. A photo of Liam and Lucas, secretly taken in the garden, was published with the headline, "Billionaire's Hidden Heirs." The boys recognized themselves instantly. At school, the whispers began. He's the billionaire's kid. She's just the secretary's son. Unwanted children. They were too young to understand the full weight of those words. All they knew was the sting in each look, each comment. They began blaming themselves in hushed voices. We're making Mom sad. It's our fault she fainted. We're the reason we're on TV. People are mad at Dad because of us. One rainy night, the twins quietly slipped out of the house. They left behind a folded note on the desk. We don't want to trouble anyone anymore. We're going to find a place where we won't make Mom and Dad sad. We love you. The next morning, Emily screamed when she realized the boys were gone. Jonathan collapsed to his knees when he read the note. Business, reputation, connections, none of it mattered. They contacted police, searched traffic cameras, and reached out through every channel they had. 2 days passed with no word. On the third day, as rain drizzled over Green Hill Cemetery, an elderly woman with kind eyes appeared, holding the boys, soaked, muddy, and shivering, in each arm. Rebecca, Emily gasped, recognizing her old colleague from 7 years ago. Rebecca Sanders, a former legal assistant at Reed Corporation, had stood by Emily when Carl Winston had tried to intimidate her. I happened to visit their grandmother's grave, Rebecca explained, voice thick with emotion. I knew Emily used to go there when she was hurting. I didn't expect to find the boys curled up under the wooden bench. Back at Reed Manor, Rebecca pulled a small recorder from her purse. I've kept this for years. The day Carl came to threaten Emily, I left a recorder running in the next room. Jonathan, you need to hear this. She played the recording. What do you think you're doing? Jonathan's about to get engaged to someone else. This baby will ruin everything. Sign the paper, take the money, and disappear. Or I'll leak the story myself with this recording. Jonathan sat in stunned silence, eyes glassy. Emily knelt beside the boys, tears quietly streaking her face. That night Carl left, and I chose to stay silent, she said hoarsely. For the boys' safety, because I was scared. I didn't know who I could trust. Jonathan dropped to his knees beside her, his voice breaking. I've already lost 7 years. I can't lose even one more day. Liam tugged at his sleeve. Lucas clung to Emily's side. We thought we made everything worse, Liam whispered. We felt ashamed, like everyone blamed us. Jonathan opened his arms and pulled all 3 of them close. We're a family, and no one in a family is a burden. Outside, the drizzle still fell. But inside Reed Manor, beneath the warm golden light, something long overdue finally happened. A photograph was taken, not for headlines, not for image, but for memory. It captured a family, not perfect, not without scars, but rooted in love. And that love, fragile as it was worth protecting. That morning, the Boston sky was steel gray, with a heavy, unmoving cloud blanketing the family courthouse. Jonathan Reed stood outside the courthouse in a crisp gray suit, his collar neatly adjusted, but inside he was a storm. Beside him, twin boys Liam and Lucas held hands tightly, their expressions a mix of nervousness and hope. Not far away, Emily sat quietly, clutching a worn handbag that seemed to carry the weight of her life's hidden corners. Inside the courtroom, Judge Thomas Green, no stranger to complex family cases, custody battles, or unwanted pregnancies, was about to witness something he had never seen before. 2 sides who wanted exactly the same thing: acknowledgement. Jonathan submitted the DNA test results filed previously. On that plain sheet of paper was irrefutable proof of biological connection between Jonathan Reed and the 2 boys. The DNA match, 99.9986%. Undeniable. Judge Green cleared his throat. Mr. Reed, he began, I have reviewed all documentation. The paternity is scientifically confirmed. More importantly, I have witnessed your genuine care and responsibility toward the boys. Jonathan held Liam and Lucas's hands. They gripped his fingers tightly, as if afraid that one wrong word could cause everything to vanish. I hereby grant full legal paternity to Mr. Jonathan Reed, Judge Green declared. Additionally, per the family's wishes, I approve the official name change to Liam Parker Reed and Lucas Parker Reed. Emily turned away to wipe her tears. Inside her was a galaxy of emotions: regret, release, and hope. She had spent years raising her sons alone, haunted by what she thought was rejection. But now, the truth stood clear. Jonathan never abandoned them, because he had never known. As they exited the courthouse, reporters surged to capture the moment. But gone were the headlines like "Real Estate Tycoon's Illegitimate Sons" or "Secret Affair Behind Mansion Walls." Now, the headlines read, "A father finds his sons in the harshest of circumstances, from brokenness to reunion." Jonathan and Emily walked down the white stone steps, each holding a child's hand. Liam looked back, squeezing his father's hand tightly. Then Lucas, his voice soft but steady, asked, "Can I call you Dad now?" Jonathan didn't answer with words. He bent down, kissed the tops of their heads, and exhaled slowly, as if releasing a lifetime of guilt in one breath. That evening, in the once quiet drawing room of the long-shuttered estate, now bathed in candlelight and the hushed breath of emotion, Jonathan, Emily, and their son sat together around the table, looking through the newly taken family photos. "Congratulations, Reed family," said Mrs. Dawson, the long-serving housekeeper, entering with a tray of warm chocolate chip cookies. "Congratulations, Liam Parker Reed and Lucas Parker Reed," she added, her eyes glistening. In that moment, there were no titles, no legacies, no wealth, only 4 people bound by love, by the pain they had faced, and by the forgiveness they had chosen. Outside, spring was arriving. The snow had begun to melt. Fresh green buds pushed up beneath the old maple tree by the fountain. And in the hearts of those beginning again, there was a home. The Reed family. Spring had come. The fields surrounding Jonathan Reed's estate were green again. Sparrows chirped loudly on the rooftops, and the first blossoms of the season had begun to open. Inside the house that was once so dim and silent, now echoed with endearing noise. Liam asking about books, Lucas searching for his crayons, and the soft back and forth between the boys as they discussed an idea for school. A year had passed. Jonathan was no longer the businessman who wore his watch like armor every time he entered a boardroom. He had learned to slow down, to pour milk into Lucas's cereal before school, to tell Liam it was okay if he didn't finish his comic on time. Now, good luck today wasn't a polite ritual. It was warm, sincere, spoken with a hug before the boys got on the bus. Emily Parker was no longer the exhausted, solitary mother who had once stepped into the mansion with trembling hands. Now, she met the world with calm and compassion. The Reed Family Project, a foundation supporting single mothers and children in vulnerable circumstances, had been founded and run by her own hands. It was her way of keeping a promise to the past, that no one would be forced to choose between silence and survival ever again. Though Jonathan and Emily didn't live under the same roof, they had learned to walk side by side, like true partners. They shared time, responsibilities, and the quiet care that comes from co-parenting with intention. One early autumn afternoon, Walnut Grove Elementary held its annual talent show. In a crowded auditorium, Emily sat in a soft beige coat, clutching a printed program with her son's names on it. Jonathan sat beside her. He was used to commanding conference rooms from the front row, but today he was nervously fidgeting like any other dad. On stage, Liam performed a short piano piece chosen by his music teacher. His small fingers moved with an elegance rarely seen at his age. Jonathan watched in awe as his son moved across the keys like he was pouring out quiet, tangled thoughts. "That's the first child I've ever seen who plays with such feeling," the teacher beside him whispered. But then came the moment that stilled the room. Lucas stepped onto the stage, holding a piece of paper. "My poem is called Courage," he began, his voice small but clear. "Courage is knocking on a door when you're hungry. Courage is saying hello inside a stranger's home. Courage is facing the father you thought had forgotten you. Courage is forgiving mistakes that weren't yours. Courage is helping rebuild a broken family. Courage is saying, 'I love you, Dad,' even when he's been gone for a long time." The auditorium fell silent. A couple in the back row quietly wiped away tears. Emily clutched her chest, overcome. Jonathan turned his face away, blinking back the red in his eyes. After the show, several teachers came up to Emily. "The children were crying," one said. "Even the teachers cried. You're raising boys with hearts this big." On the way home, Lucas had no idea that his poem would go viral, that it would be shared across social media, and that the Reed Family Project would receive its largest wave of support yet. He was only reading what was already in his heart. That night, after the house had gone quiet, Jonathan remained in the living room under the soft glow of a reading lamp. In front of him was a photo of the boys playing in the garden, and beside it, Emily's original letter, written long ago in a moment of uncertainty and hope. Those who think they're doing the right thing sometimes destroy what's most beautiful. That morning in Boston was overcast, much like the mood inside the courtroom. Jonathan Reed sat silently beside his attorney, his charcoal gray suit crisp, but unable to hide the weariness in his eyes. Across from him stood Carl Winston, once his closest confidant, the man who had once vowed to protect his reputation, now on the witness stand, holding a stack of incriminating documents. The courtroom fell into stillness as the audio recording played. Carl's cold, commanding voice filled the room. "Either you disappear and stay silent, or I'll report you for internal misconduct. Jonathan's about to get engaged. Don't ruin everything." Emily sat in the audience, clutching the hands of her two sons. Liam and Lucas didn't say a word, but their eyes followed every word of the recording. The way adults had turned their lives into calculated strategy, it was cruel beyond words. Judge Green's voice broke the silence. "Mr. Winston, do you wish to explain why you withheld information about a child from the very man you claim to be protecting?" Carl swallowed hard and shook his head. I thought. At the time, I believed it was the right thing to do. Reed Group's image was fragile, and... That's enough, Jonathan interrupted, not with anger, but quiet finality. You thought reputation mattered more than truth, more than family. Outside, the press captured every moment. Images of Carl being escorted by federal officers quickly went viral. Reed Group stock, which had once dipped during the emotional scandal, suddenly rebounded. Shareholders, once doubtful of Jonathan's stability, unanimously voted to keep him as CEO. In a press conference shortly after the verdict, Jonathan said little about Carl or himself. Instead, he spoke of Emily, of his sons, and of the pieces we reclaim on the journey back to family. We've all made mistakes, he said, but some mistakes, if met with silence and avoidance, end up hurting the most innocent among us. Across social media, #JusticeForEmily began trending. Photos of Liam and Lucas reading in the library with Jonathan spread rapidly. One user wrote, "Fatherhood isn't about DNA. It's in the whispered bedtime stories, the tight hugs during nightmares." That afternoon, Rebecca Sanders, the friend who had provided the recording, visited Emily. In the quiet comfort of a small living room, the two women sat beside each other, saying little. But in the silence, trust was reborn. "I stayed silent because I thought I didn't deserve to be a part of his life," Emily whispered. "But now I know. Every choice we made led us here to one thing, family." That evening, while Liam and Lucas were drawing in their study room, Jonathan walked by and noticed a simple note taped above their art table. In the boy's handwriting, it read, "Our family. Home." And in that moment, he no longer doubted a thing. The greatest thing he had ever built was not his empire, but the people gathered around crayons and construction paper in that room. Carl's price was prison. Jonathan's redemption was not a statement. It was lived daily, in every bedtime story, in every shared meal that meant more than 1,000 press releases. And here, this was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning of something once thought irreparable, the true rebirth of a family. An autumn afternoon settled over the city in a quiet golden haze. In the grand estate nestled in Westchester's quiet hills, Jonathan Reed stood before a door he hadn't opened in 7 years. The door he never had the courage to face since Claire passed away. The door to the nursery, a room once lovingly prepared for the child they never had. Over the years, the nursery had still been cleaned regularly by the housekeeping staff, out of routine. But it was like a silent shrine within the mansion. No one entered. No one spoke of it. Jonathan clenched his fists gently and took a deep breath. He heard the soft sound of small footsteps behind him. "What are you doing, Uncle?" Lucas asked, his eyes full of curiosity. Jonathan turned, placing a hand on each boy's shoulder. "Today," he said, "I want to show you something special." Without hesitation, he opened the door. The handle creaked, resisting at first, as if protesting after years of silence. And then a rush of cold air escaped, carrying with it memories long frozen in time. The nursery revealed itself in soft light. Pale pastel blue walls, stuffed animals neatly arranged on shelves, a white crib tucked into the corner, and beside it, the small rocking chair Claire had once loved. Liam stepped in slowly, wide-eyed. "It's just like a storybook," he whispered. Lucas spoke more softly, almost reverently. "Who set everything up so perfectly?" "Claire," Jonathan replied gently. "She prepared every corner for the child we never got to meet." His voice cracked slightly. He turned and saw Emily standing quietly in the doorway, the amber sunset casting a glow over her pale, thoughtful face. "She prepared this for children she never even got to meet, didn't she?" Emily said softly. Jonathan nodded. For the first time, there was no hurt or blame between them, only a quiet, shared understanding. In the days that followed, Liam and Lucas moved into the nursery. The twin bed Claire had once chosen, just in case it was twins, she'd said, was cleaned and refreshed, new linens added, small belongings rearranged. "The pillows feel like clouds," Lucas murmured as he sank into the fresh white sheets. Emily began visiting more often. Though she hadn't said yes to moving in, she brought home-cooked meals, tidied the children's things, and read bedtime stories. Each night, the nursery slowly transformed, from a room of sorrow to a space filled with laughter, trust, and new dreams. Jonathan quietly hung a painting Claire had done above the headboard, a soft image of warm arms cradling a baby's quilt. What was once a space of longing became a place where joy lived. One late evening, Jonathan stood once again at the nursery door. Inside, the boys were fast asleep. Emily sat gently in the rocking chair, flipping through one of Claire's old books. "I'm glad I finally opened that door," Jonathan whispered. "And I'm even more grateful that you let the boys come home." Emily looked up at him, her eyes steady, no longer carrying fear or doubt. "Now I believe Claire wouldn't have wanted anything different," she said. "That walking this path with you was never a mistake." Outside, the moonlight poured softly over the garden, and inside Jonathan's heart, a weight he had carried for years finally melted away. Family isn't about blood. It's about where you choose to love and be loved in return. That Sunday morning, Jonathan Reed awoke to something he hadn't heard in years. Not silence. Instead, there was the soft laughter of Lucas and the creak of the nursery door as Liam reached for a book on the shelf. He didn't forget where he was. This wasn't a cold, hollow mansion anymore. It was a home, a family. Jonathan made his way to the kitchen, where he found Emily holding a steaming cup of tea. She glanced at him with a smile that was both familiar and lighthearted. "Good morning, Jonathan." "Good morning," he replied. And for the first time in many years, saying Emily felt natural, not wrapped in regret, not heavy with unspoken history. Just two people learning again how to be parents. After breakfast, Jonathan brought the boys into the living room. On the hardwood floor stood a stepladder, and beside it, a few new picture frames. "Happy early birthday," he grinned, handing Liam a framed photo, Jonathan sitting with Lucas on his shoulders and Liam holding his hand. "We're hanging it right there," Jonathan said, pointing to a bare spot on the wall. "Our first family photo." Lucas hopped off his chair and ran over to see. "I really do look like you," he whispered, then hugged Jonathan tightly. Later, that same photo became Jonathan's desktop background at work. Every time he opened his laptop, between invoices, meetings, lawsuits, it reminded him, nothing matters more than seeing his children smile. Emily still kept some distance, but Jonathan's quiet consistency began melting the last of her caution. One night, after the boys had gone to bed, as Jonathan was tidying the living room, Emily approached with a small card in her hand. "Next week is the boys' 7th birthday," she said gently. "I was thinking of a small garden party, something familiar and calm for them. Will you be free?" Jonathan nearly choked on his words. "I won't miss a single one again." Emily smiled softly. "I know. Thank you for trying." The birthday party was held under strings of warm lights, with small chairs, homemade cupcakes, and garden tables decorated by Emily's careful hands. Liam and Lucas opened gifts with their classmates, while Jonathan sat at the edge of the yard, quietly watching. Then Lucas turned around, beaming. "Dad, come over here with us." A few moments later, all three stood in front of the birthday table. As the candles flickered and the camera clicked, a new photo was captured. Jonathan holding both boys in his arms. Emily beside them, her hand resting gently on Lucas's shoulder. In that moment, the house no longer echoed. The walls no longer felt cold, and the hearts within were no longer guarded. Jonathan looked around at the room he once called empty, at the wall where he knew, without a doubt, he would hang this photo, as a quiet promise to himself, that while the past could never be rewritten, love, when chosen and given each day, can do what once seemed impossible, heal what was once broken. Love never disappears. It only waits for the right moment to come alive again. Autumn in Westbridge often carried a gentle golden light, soft and wistful, like an old memory belonging to someone else. But that day, inside the gray stone house of the Reed family, it felt deeper, almost sacred. Lucas Reed was rummaging in the corner of a wooden cabinet, digging through what his mother called the memory box, an old wicker chest with a rusty latch. Inside were years' worth of keepsakes Emily had quietly preserved, crayon drawings from the boys, faded photographs filled with unspoken tenderness. And at the bottom, a letter that had never been sent. "Dad," Lucas called out, his small hands trembling as he held up the fragile piece of paper. "I found this in Mom's box." Jonathan walked over and gently took the letter from his son's hands. On the envelope were familiar handwriting strokes. He knew them instantly. "Emily, Jonathan, if one day you ever wish to know about our child, the door will always be open. If not, I only pray that they grow up surrounded by love, even if it doesn't come from you. I hold no resentment. I understand that we each must choose our own path. And so, I must choose mine for our child's sake. Emily." Jonathan read the letter 3 times. His hand still shook. There was no anger in Emily's words. No blame. Just a quiet farewell placed gently at the threshold of a new life. A door he had never seen, never crossed, because someone else had locked it without ever telling him. Emily was sitting in the living room when Jonathan laid the letter on the table. The boys were seated beside her, quietly watching. "I read it," Jonathan said, his voice low, "and it made me remember everything. But more than that, it made me realize that the thing I fear most isn't having made mistakes. It's knowing I left you to face it all alone." Emily nodded slowly. "Back then, I didn't have a choice. I doubted you. I thought maybe you didn't want to know. But reading this letter again now, I realized that deep down, I wanted the door to stay open for you. I just didn't know how." Lucas and Liam exchanged a glance, then turned to their parents. "Mom, Dad, was it because of us that you were sad?" Liam asked softly. Jonathan turned to them and knelt down, his voice firm and warm. "Never. Not ever. Because of you two, your mom and I, we've learned what it truly means to love, and what it means to forgive." The 4 of them sat together for a long while, reading through a letter that had once been buried in dust and silence. And for the first time, they read it not with grief or blame, but with understanding. The door had been opened, and in that soft in-between moment of an autumn day, in the golden hush of a new beginning, Jonathan knew something was being healed, because true love never vanishes. It only waits, to be seen, to be claimed at exactly the right time. And this was that time. A true family, not found on paper, but in the heart. That afternoon, golden autumn light filtered through the red leaves of the old maple tree in Eden Hill Cemetery. From a distance, a small family approached quietly. Jonathan Reed held the hands of his twin sons, Liam and Lucas, their steps soft and steady against the crunch of fallen leaves. Emily Parker walked beside them, silent, carrying a fresh bouquet of lavender. The tension that once hovered between them had long since vanished. They walked like people who had weathered something, grief, reckoning, and finally, acceptance. At the small grave, the headstone read, "Claire Reed, beloved wife, forever missed." Emily knelt and placed the flowers down with a sigh. The boys sat quietly beside each other, each lost in their own thoughtful silence. Jonathan gazed at the headstone, his lips pressing into a line. His voice, when it came, was steady. "I've become a better man, Claire, because of you." Lucas looked up at him and whispered gently, "I think, if Claire hadn't taught you how to love someone, maybe Liam and I would have never knocked on your door." Jonathan knelt beside him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. His eyes shimmered. "You're right, Lucas. Claire was the first person who made me want to marry, want to be a father, even if I never truly got to be those things for her. Because of her, I understand what love means." Emily placed her hand on Jonathan's shoulder, no words needed. In that moment, they all understood. Claire was still with them, not just in the earth beneath their feet, but in every healing choice they'd made since. That evening, as they returned from the cemetery, the Reed home was aglow with warm yellow light. The scent of sponge cake filled the air, and soft jazz played from an old record player in the corner. Emily cooked dinner with the boys, while Jonathan sat in his office, facing a framed photo of the 3 of them. Himself, Liam, and Lucas, laughing and holding a silly drawing the boys had made on their birthday. "Family," Jonathan whispered, "is the only thing I truly want to protect. On this land, He had built an empire, amassed wealth, power, reputation. But not until Liam and Lucas knocked on his door one winter afternoon had he learned what it meant to be seen. That night, dinner felt quieter, more special. As they sat at the table, Emily placed a sealed envelope in front of Jonathan. "What's this?" he asked, tilting his head. "Something you should read, one last time." Jonathan opened it. Inside was an old letter, handwritten in pale blue ink. "Jonathan, I'm pregnant. I've thought about this a lot, and I've decided to raise this child, even without you. I don't expect anything from you, but I wanted you to know. If someday you want to know your child, the door will always be open. If not, they'll grow up with love, just not from you. Emily." Jonathan folded the letter again. No words left to say. His expression was calm now, no longer bitter, just quietly resolute. Emily sat, still watching. "I wish I'd read it 7 years ago," he murmured. She replied softly, "I wish the door hadn't been closed by someone else." A week later, the Reed family sat together in the backyard garden. Liam was wobbling through his first solo ride on a bike without training wheels. Lucas, in oversized, satellite-themed goggles, was giggling while pretending to build a spaceship. Jonathan sat at a picnic table, reaching out just in time to steady Liam before he veered into a tree. "Hey, don't look back at me. Watch the road." They all burst into laughter. In that moment, there was no Claire, no courtroom, no legal definitions or public scrutiny. Only love, real love, in the heart. And that was the beginning, not the end. This family wasn't built by blood. It was forged by choice, by forgiveness, by small, steady acts of love. A real family, not on paper, but in the heart. A real family, not on paper, but in the heart. In today's modern world, where success is often measured by fame, titles, and the size of one's bank account, the story of Jonathan Reed, a wealthy businessman who unexpectedly discovers he has twin sons, gently reminds us of a value that cannot be quantified: family. Jonathan was once the poster image of the modern man, powerful, decisive, and alone. He built an empire through intellect and discipline, but it wasn't until 2 children knocked on his door one freezing night that he realized his heart had been empty of the one thing that truly matters: human connection. At every turn, the story charts a transformation, not just for Jonathan, but for Emily, the single mother who raised her children in silence and strength, for Liam and Lucas, 2 children brave enough to ask for food while still holding on to their dignity, and for a community that once judged, but ultimately opened its heart to sincerity. So, what does this story teach us in today's world? 1. Success means little if you have no one to share it with. Jonathan had it all: an opulent mansion, luxury cars, accolades, and respect in the financial world. But every night, in a quiet house devoid of laughter, he only had whiskey and memories for company. This reflects a truth many high achievers face. We become so consumed by our work that we lose sight of what matters most: family, friendship, even ourselves. The story begs the question: is the true value of life found in accomplishments, or in who's waiting for us to come home? 2. No one is perfect, but anyone can begin again with love. Emily kept her secret and bore years of loneliness, believing Jonathan had turned away. Jonathan, too, believed he had made the right choices, until the truth unraveled before him. Both were filled with regret when they finally looked back. But instead of being consumed by the past, they chose to face it, to forgive, and to rebuild from the broken pieces. In life, we're often haunted by mistakes we think can never be undone. But the truth is, as long as there is honesty and a willingness to say, "I'm ready to begin again," there's always a way home. 3. Children don't need perfection. They need presence. Liam and Lucas never asked for wealth or power. They just needed someone to listen, to play with them, to wipe their tears and smile at their little triumphs. What made them run away wasn't the lack of money. It was the fear that they were a burden. It's a stark reminder in an age where adults provide more than they connect. We can buy expensive toys and hire the best tutors. But if we're absent during dinner or bedtime stories, children grow up with a quiet emptiness we never see. 4. Forgiveness isn't spoken. It's shown day by day. It wasn't a courtroom decision or a heartfelt apology that healed the wounds. It was Jonathan showing up every day, driving the boys to school, reading with them, attending performances, taking Emily to the doctor. True apology isn't in words. It's in patient change, in quiet consistency, in love lived out daily. Forgiveness, like love, is not a moment. It's a habit built through trust, one action at a time. 5. A family doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be real. Jonathan, Emily, and the boys weren't a picture-perfect family. They had a painful beginning, deep misunderstandings, and emotional scars. But those very cracks became the spaces where light came through, where simple gestures, soft glances, and kept promises wove together a real home. In a world obsessed with image and idealism, their story reminds us. Family is not the absence of conflict. It's the place we choose to return to, because there, we're loved, even if we're not perfect. From this story, we don't just shed tears at moving moments. We reflect on ourselves. Each of us has, at some point, ignored a call from mom out of busyness, or fought with dad and never said sorry, or drifted apart from a spouse over unspoken hurt. Somewhere out there are children like Liam and Lucas who simply want to be held. And here, I'm here. Jonathan's story doesn't end with a castle or a grand speech. It ends with a family visiting Claire's grave under the fall sunset, not in mourning, but in gratitude. Because some love, even when gone, still guides us towards something better. And if you've read this far, ask yourself, in this life, have I truly chosen what matters most? If not, begin today with a phone call, a simple apology, a hug, or maybe by knocking on someone's heart. Thank you so much for being here. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to bring you more heartfelt stories soon. Until next time, stay kind, stay inspired, and I'll see you in the next one.